Boker Tov, everyone, and welcome to A Taste of Torah. I'm excited to be using the Zoom feature of putting a background behind me. And in this particular case, I'm providing myself with a background that's whiter than I am. So we are in the week following the end of Pesach, and we have a Torah portion, Shemini. But before we get to that, I want to allude to an often neglected aspect of Jewish holiday cycle that is occurring. Matter of fact, began the second night of Pesach. The second night of Pesach, by Jewish tradition, we begin a period called counting the Omer. Now, as you might guess, an Omer is a sheaf of barley in this case. There were two cycles of sustenance crops that came in for the Israelites in the ancient world. And the first one was the barley, which started in the spring and was ready to be harvested right about now, which would be followed by the wheat, or I think we today call it winter wheat, that would be planted in midsummer and be harvested in the fall. So this added both variety and also maximalization of the use of farmland in ancient Israel. Now, it seems to us fairly irrelevant what we're doing, which was in the ancient tradition was that you had to bring an offering of first fruits. I actually like this because that's pretty much what happened. You were required to bring a sheaf of first fruits barley to the temple as a wave offering to the temple. So everyone would show up with their sheaf over the course of 50 or 49, really 49 days. And on the 50th day, it would be the holiday of Shavuot. That would be celebrated, and then it was time to plant the barley. So, not terribly relevant to us, it seems, but the adaptiveness of Jewish tradition, of course, is never to be sneezed at. And so, even though this agricultural tradition, which is quaint and charming in its own way, uh, really seems to be irrelevant to us. The rabbis think it through in a way that makes it useful for urban people and modern people. And this is the association they make. Okay, so look at a sheaf of barley is a midah, a measure. And so, you gather up sheaves for 50 measures and bring them in. However, the word measure allows more general applications. So the rabbis rephrase this in terms of midot, that's the plural. Midot means measures or qualities, right? And they end up talking not about foodstuffs, but about our personal qualities, the measure of a man, the measure of a woman. And so what happens is that we spiritualize this agricultural tradition, and it's become customary for quite some time, hundreds of years, to count the Omer every day to fulfill the biblical commandment, but also to do cheshbon nefesh, that is, to do an assessment of one's soul. And so what has evolved over time is lists of personal midot, personal qualities, um, courage, equanimity, patience, kindness, generosity. And we are encouraged each day of the counting of the Omer to think about one quality a day and how we can cultivate that midah and develop it. Instead of growing literal fruits of the field, we grow fruits of the spirit, and it's actually quite charming. You can go on uh, the internet and you will find many, many websites. Jews were very good at websites. Many, many websites devoted to the theme of personal development and cultivation of good attributes and traits that we concentrate on this time of year. And so I would encourage you to go and look at this. And if you're thinking you want to do some work on yourself, uh, this is a good time. There's always good, thoughtful things to look at and to contemplate. And I would encourage you to explore that because none of us are ever completely done with ourselves. We're always in a state of improving things. And this is, as we would say in modern psychology, a period for growth development. Get it? All right. So let me just tell you the bracha that you're supposed to say every day. And we are, when I'm recording this, we are in the 8th day of counting the Omer. So it goes like this: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sifrat haomer. Hayom yom shmoneh sifrat haomer. What did I say? Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of time and space, who sanctifies us with commandments and commands us to count the Omer. And then you declare this day is the 8th day of counting the Omer. And so you do that until we reach the holiday of Shavuot, which I hope you're anticipating. I think we will try and have a learning Shavuot event come May, and I hope you'll participate in that. All right, let's get to our Torah portion, and I could even make a sort of intellectual bridge, and that is our Torah portion is called Shemini. And the intellectual bridge is that, like this, it involves food. But I also, the bigger picture, I think, that comes out of our Torah portion is the idea of setting boundaries. Now, the two major events that I want to talk about in our Torah portion, in Shemini, is one, there is a tragedy in the process of dedicating the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary. Aaron performs rituals of dedication, and then his two sons, Nadav and Avihu, also participate in this. However, something goes awry, and they are struck down by divine forces while they're attempting to do this. It's not at all clear what was the problem. We are told that they did, basically, they offered Eish Zara, an alien fire, undefined. Isn't clear at all what they were doing in front of the altar that was a problem. There are many speculations about it. But suffice to say, they have a Spielberg moment where a blast of fire comes out of the heavens and kills both of them. A pretty awkward message to come out. Now, I'm sure our ancestors perceived this with the idea that holiness and moving around close to holiness is rather like dealing with electricity. Electricity is very beneficial, but it can turn on you in a moment. And so this message conveys that idea about boundaries. The rabbis are not satisfied with that answer, and instead they find a number of moral explanations, the moral shortcomings of the sons that lead to this punishment. Kabbalism even goes in a different direction. They basically say that the life cycle of the souls of these two men were done, and they were ready to move on to their next stage of existence, and so they went out with a bang. So that saves their reputation. So I'm not going to argue that one way or another. They're all interesting. I encourage you to read them. The second part of Shemini is talking about Kashrut, keeping kosher. And it is the bulk of the sources for our tradition of observing what we eat. And it concentrates on animals, fish, meat products, those things that most mark kashrut. Now, things like grain and vegetables are innately kosher. Doesn't mean they're safe or they're healthy. As far as the Torah is concerned, even poisonous mushrooms are kosher. So keep that in mind when you think about this system. It's not necessarily about health or hygiene, it's about holiness. It's the third H in the list. And it lists all these animals that you can eat and the animals you can't eat. Most famously, of course, there is a prohibition against eating pork, but you want to include camel in that. Shouldn't eat a camel. Nor should you eat a rock badger, whatever the hell that is. No one knows what a rock badger is, but apparently they were common and kind of delicious in the ancient world. So want to avoid those. And then, of course, it tells us things we can eat, like cows and sheep and goats and different kinds of poultry, though the chicken did not yet exist as a domesticated animal in ancient Israel, and waterfowl, like ducks and geese and things like that. All right. I'm not going to go through the list. And instead, I'm going to shift and put on my Reform Rabbi hat by saying to you, look, the very basis of Reform Judaism is that the authority to say what is right and wrong for each individual has been taken out of the hands of the tradition and out of the hands of the rabbi, and the locus of authority is with you. You get to decide how you practice or don't practice your Judaism. You, as a Reformed Jew, get to decide what is and isn't important to express your Jewishness. So I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do in the practice of Kashrut. When I first came to Congregation Kol Ami, the first thing I said to everyone was, look, we're all Reformed Jews. I'm a Reformed rabbi, but my authority ends at my nose. So I would suggest this operating rule. I won't judge your choices in Jewish practice, and you don't judge mine. And that's the principle about which I've operated all this time. We do attempt to maintain a certain semblance of community discipline when we're inside the building, but otherwise, nobody worries about what you eat. Nobody worries about what you post on Facebook. None of that kind of thing. That's not my business. That's your business. However, I will take a moment to share with you my personal relationship with Jewish dietary practice. And it goes something like this. We live in a culture, it's a Protestant culture. And in a Protestant culture, you can eat anything. But the truth of the matter is, most religious traditions around the world have some kind of taboos or some kind of prohibitions around food, virtually everything from Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, all the big brand name religions have some consideration of what we eat. And I, for one, in my personal life, in my practice, in my Jewish identity, I do pretty much what is often characterized as biblical kashrut. That is to say, I don't necessarily worry about whether an animal has been slaughtered according to the standards of kashrut, mimicking the traditions of sacred slaughter in the ancient temple. That would require you to buy kosher meat and kosher fish and things like that. Rather, I'm happy to eat a hamburger, preferably not at McDonald's, maybe at Five Guys, that is just produced through the general process. But what I do is I avoid those overtly trafe foods in the world. So as much as I appreciate bacon, I skip bacon. As much as I admire a pepperoni pizza, I don't do pepperoni. That's my choice. And I do it, first of all, because of identification with Jewish history and Jewish tradition. And I love the fact that I am a hobbit, so I eat like 6 meals a day. So 6 times a day, I am reminded of my Jewish identity. I have to reflect on being Jewish as I think about what I put in my mouth. And I find that rewarding, comforting, and reinforcing of my identity. Uh, on top of all of that, I think it's good to be able to set boundaries. If I'm going to, I have to make a movie reference, right? So if I'm going to make a movie reference, I would think of Harry Callahan, the rogue cop played by Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry, where he states, "A man's got to know his limitations," right? Now, he says that with a certain degree of irony, but I think that's true too. So it's good for me to set my own boundaries. And of course, that's what's happening with what happens to Nadav and Abihu. They violate boundaries, and it doesn't end well for them. Now, we in modern culture appreciate people who push boundaries, who demand we rethink outworn conventional practices. And as a Jew who loves to ask questions, as Jews who engage in a hermeneutic of self-reflection and skepticism, I think you should do that too. But I would say for me personally, it's not a matter of reviewing to dismiss, but reviewing to decide. And I hope that is for you too. That when you look at these different Jewish practices, every once in a while you say, "Oh, I never really cared about that, but now that's kind of cool." Whether it's lighting Shabbos candles or hosting a Seder or any number of Jewish traditions. Each one of them has, I believe, some value. And it's if there is an obligation on Reform Jews, it is to constantly revisit and rediscover the values in our tradition. Doesn't mean you have to observe them, but it's incumbent upon us, I believe, to know them. So Shemini, just like counting the Omer, may seem to contain a lot of seemingly obsolete ideas, but in fact, they remain as contemporary as the human experience. Each of us has to define our boundaries. Each of us makes choices about what we eat and don't eat every day. Each of us decides how close we're going to come to high risk behavior in order to achieve what we want to achieve. So both Shavuot and Shemini come to remind us to be thoughtful, to be mindful, and to be self-aware. Have a great day, everyone, and I look forward to sharing ideas with you next week.